Good afternoon and welcome to this webcast, The State of Strategic Sourcing, Connecting the Dots, brought to you by Institute for Supply Management and sponsored by Zycus. I'm your moderator, John Yuva. Thanks for joining us. Before we begin the presentation, I want to provide you with a few housekeeping items. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during this webcast. Just type your question into the lower right corner of the screen and then click the Submit button. If you need technical assistance, submit a question and you can open the Q&A panel to see any written responses back to you. This webcast contains audience polling. The polling question will appear in the slide presentation window. Please complete the poll when they appear and click on the Submit Answer button located on the polling slide window. Please take our survey following the webcast. We appreciate your feedback. Today's presenters are Andrew Bartolini, Chief Research Officer at Ardent Partners. Andrew is a globally recognized expert in sourcing, procurement, and supply management. At Ardent Partners, he focuses his research and efforts on helping enterprises develop and execute strategies to achieve operational excellence within their procurement and finance departments. He also publishes the popular blog, CPO Rising. Our second presenter is Zachary Bolt, Director of Solutions Consulting at Zycus Inc. Zach has worked in software sales, implementation, and support throughout his career. He has also worked in procurement as well as asset management and ERP, inventory management, and demand planning. He heads Global Solutions Consulting in support of the sales team based in North America. Andrew and Zach, welcome to the program.
Thanks, John. Great to be here. This is Andrew Bartolini speaking. And you see today's agenda, right? I think we've just basically completed the introduction part. And then I'm going to talk to you about the latest research report that my firm is conducting that is focused on the state of strategic sourcing. This is a world premiere of the results. The report is publishing late next week, and Zycus will be able to make that report available to you. We'll also be writing about some of the insights and the findings of that research effort on our blog, CPO Rising. But after talking about the state of strategic sourcing, in fact, my entire presentation is really focused on that, we'll drill down and look at what best-in-class organizations, what best-in-class sourcing organizations are doing today, how they're able to differentiate their performance from the rest of the competitive set. I'm then going to close out with some strategies for success or recommendations, and then pass it over to Zach, who will walk you through a few great Zycus case studies. So let's begin. So I want to just sort of level set and explain to you our research process so you've got some context to understand what the data that I'm about to present to you actually means. And so, you know, in my career as a research analyst and working in industry, right, I've conducted you know, a couple hundred of these types of reports, and really the goal and the focus of this report is to go out and understand what the strategies, performances, and intentions of Chief Procurement Officers and other sourcing leaders are this year and beyond. Now, what we've done ultimately is crafted a web-based survey of about 35 questions, and we've gotten 249 verifiable procurement executives, CPOs, and others who work in the sourcing profession to answer that survey. We then go out and I think I've interviewed about 15 sourcing leaders from global organizations to add some context to this as well. And then what we're going to do today is present those initial findings of the report again that we'll publish next week. So the state of strategic sourcing in 2014, right? So in 2014, Chief Procurement Officers have really been focused on extracting and delivering more value from their departments than ever before as they attempt to stretch the limits of their organizations while also maximizing the relationships they have developed with suppliers and internal stakeholders. Now, procurement's ability to impact business processes, relationships, and results continues, but the depth and breadth of that impact will depend on each organization's ability to master its processes and technologies, and it'll also be based upon the ability of its leaders to maintain the department's focus and ensure fast but assured decision-making and crisp and agile sourcing execution, as we're almost certain to approach more challenging times in the next few years. Now, additionally, the speed and complexity of business continues to accelerate, forcing sourcing professionals to adapt to new market conditions and react to new opportunities while maintaining discipline and efficiency. Agile organizations are the ones that are going to win the day because those groups, those enterprises in general, have become more reliant upon the relationships and events that exist beyond their walls, right? And so as agility and innovation begin and really start to define market leadership over the next decade, it's going to be the sourcing leaders and the Chief Procurement Officers' versatility and general capacity to support non-traditional roles and responsibilities that are going to play an increasingly important role in how well they succeed and advance. So, you know, in many regards, right, so for everybody listening in today, or if you're listening to this in an archive, the procurement function is pretty universal, right? Most sourcing teams around the globe manage similar processes, they share similar goals and challenges, and they leverage similar tools and strategies to drive value, right? And with globalization linking more companies and economies together, sourcing operations in different industries are increasingly operating in the similar business cycles, right? So, for example, 5 years ago, most procurement departments were operating under extreme duress as their agendas looked very different in early 2009 than they do today. Back then, procurement executives were under extraordinary pressure to deliver savings and to develop and execute smart strategies as they navigated those very tough times. Procurement-focused research at the time that I conducted showed an intensity of pressure on CPOs that had never been seen before, right? We had 9 out of 10 procurement organizations and CPOs pressured above all else to deliver savings in the immediate term. Now, today you can see that that pressure has been reduced. When CPOs and other sourcing leaders were asked to identify the top 2 business pressures facing their organizations today as part of this research study, delivering savings, it's still a top pressure. However, the level of pressure or response is at a decade-low level. And that's in no small part because the past 2 years have been nice, steady, and frankly, largely uneventful. Now, other top pressures, right, is really the importance and need for procurement to continue to expand its overall effectiveness and influence, right? And, you know, when we start to look at the marriage of savings with procurement performance goals, you know, ultimately it really is procurement's mission to help organizations, you know, help their companies, help their enterprises make smart decisions. And the way that you actually do that is by increasing the influence and impact that you have on your organization. So there's still pressure there. There's no reason to take your foot off the gas pedal and to stay focused, right? This is not a time to be complacent, but it is, you know, I guess a time to retact and refocus, but the pressure is just not there, as you can see from a savings standpoint, although still a top pressure. So what's the response that sourcing teams are taking to the pressures that they face, right? And you know, I've highlighted in red, and I think, you know, if you're to read the business, you know, if you're to read any type of business publication or story, right, it's very clear that we're working now in an age of collaboration, right? The stakes, frankly, are just too high to go it alone, right? And this is at the enterprise level, right? So companies are finding partnerships in the marketplace at a pace that's never been seen before. They've become increasingly reliant upon their suppliers and their supply chains. They become increasingly reliant upon their business partners. The same thing holds true at the business function level, right? Procurement can't just go it alone, right? They need to engage with the larger enterprise. They need to be able to engage with other business functions, right? So when you look at driving more savings, one of the best ways to do so is to place more spend under management and to run more sourcing events. So collaborate with the business to extend influence. When you look at driving savings and staying agile and finding innovation and really working with the highest value suppliers in supply markets that are changing much faster today than they did 10 years ago, there's a need to collaborate with suppliers. And when you look at the importance of aligning procurement's goals and objectives with that of the larger organization, when you look at the importance of being able to communicate the true value that procurement is delivering to the larger organization, there's a need to collaborate with the CFO, and there's a need to collaborate with other executives. Another point here, right, and this is one that really has risen over the past 2 years, is the need to improve, or really the strategy to improve the use of technology, right? When we've hit upon some fairly stable times in the economy and for procurement in general. That said, the headcounts that we've seen over the past couple of years have remained fairly flat, right? It's still hard to get new job recs. It's still hard to bring people onto a sourcing and procurement team. And so, I think organizations realize, right, they're not just doing more with less, they're really forced to do better with what they have, do better with the same headcount, do better with the same budgets, do better with the same resources. And one of the ways that organizations and CPOs are looking to do that is to really invest in new technology, but also optimize the technology that they already have in place. So when we look at hurdles to success, right, so I've been working with procurement organizations for the past 15 years, and what was true back, in the late 90s is still true today when you speak to leaders of procurement organizations. One of the challenges they have, one of the primary constraints to their ability to expand their influence and to hit their goals is the staff and talent constraints that exist today. This is both from a size and number standpoint. This is from a talent standpoint as well. And the proper blend of talented people, efficient processes, and enabling technology is needed for procurement to deliver full enterprise value. Now, getting that mix right it can be an iterative process, right? And most often it's one that's incremental. Finding and retaining the right talent, the top talent, is a top challenge for Chief Procurement Officers and sourcing leaders in 2014, and it has been for the past 5 years. But a procurement department's talent also needs to evolve as the operation matures and expands, right? Technology also needs to change, as do the underlying capabilities available in the supply management solutions market, right? So this means that CPOs must regularly evaluate on-hand resources to determine if they are equipped to support their annual and multi-year strategic plans. And they also have to determine if they are the best group, if they're the best that the group can afford today, right? Additionally, we're in a somewhat stable period, but markets are much more volatile, right? The business world is much more volatile, and it's increasingly interconnected. So when you combine those factors and you look at the drive for innovation that's collapsed most product life cycles within larger business cycles, this means that the sourcing needs of a company are more apt to shift dramatically within a business cycle than at any previous time. And so, sourcing teams and procurement teams really have to be adept and agile and finding the right staff to really be able to turn on a dime, right, or to course correct, or to understand when there have been shifts in the marketplace is more important than ever, right? I mean, again, stable times, markets aren't so volatile, but the speed of business has, just continues to accelerate, and the need to be to take a more broad view as companies and enterprises and countries and economies have become much more interconnected, requires a different set of skills than what was needed even a decade ago. And so that's going to bring us to strategic sourcing. So about a decade ago, I came up with this definition, right? And so define strategic sourcing as the process of identifying, evaluating, negotiating, and implementing the optimal mix of goods and services that best support the objectives of the enterprise, right? So nowhere here do we see the word savings, right? So certainly savings can be a sourcing goal, but it's not the only goal, right? There are other factors: supply assurance, quality. There's a whole host of reasons why business decisions are being made. But what's happened since I wrote this definition a decade ago is that the world has changed, right? The world has changed. But since that definition was created by me about a decade ago, sourcing teams have matured, right? The business environment has become more complex. The use of enterprise technology It's not quite standard operating procedure, but it really should be. And so to incorporate these changes, right, we've really looked at adding 2 corollaries to the definition I created about a decade ago. And the first is, you know, if we're going to utilize the term strategic sourcing and sourcing, they're starting to converge, and they really do mean basically the same thing, right? Strategic sourcing in 2014 is not a static methodology that can only be applied to a large multifunctional project. You know, the days of process overkill really, you know, should be behind us if they're not quite behind us yet today. Teams today must learn to take a more nuanced and agile approach to every sourcing opportunity. This means that while the same high-level steps may be followed across all sourcing projects, the level of rigor, analysis, and detail within each project should vary, right? It should be commensurate to the opportunity. And so as such, you know, strategic sourcing and sourcing, you know, those programs, they should incorporate all enterprise sourcing, including the management of large multifunctional strategic projects and those that are more tactical. The other component, of course, is that I really feel that to be strategic in any capacity in this sourcing and procurement world, you have to be utilizing the automation tools that are available in the market. And you know, hence the slightly refined and the definition that Ardent Partners is going to use going forward. And so, you know, this is going to bring us to our first and actually only survey question. I'm going to pass it back to John here.
Thank you, Andrew. Our poll question for today asks, which of the following technology solutions have you adopted? And for this poll question, please choose all that apply to your situation. Our choices are A, spend analysis, B, eSourcing, C, contract management, and D, supplier performance management. And take just a moment to complete the poll. And again, please check all that apply. And we'll give you just a moment to do that.
Right, and so this is Andrew again, right? So the solutions you see here really are the ones that when Ardent or when I think about strategic sourcing, these are the ones that are most applicable, right? These are not the only solutions that can help sourcing organizations, but when you look at the core processes that are associated with it, these are those.
Yeah, and I would say that, and this is Zach, by the way, I would say that looking at this stack of solutions here, from a technology perspective, we're seeing more and more evaluation across a full suite of products instead of just a single product, which I think the poll results here demonstrate.
Well, Andrew, it looks like spend analysis came out on top at 71%. What are your thoughts on the results?
So it looks like we have some results where, so we have participants today who may be a little bit further ahead in the marketplace from a technology adoption standpoint than the larger marketplace. So that's very positive, right? One of the themes of this year's report is, you know, or really the subtitle is called Connecting the Dots, right? And so, you know, I think that it becomes important, and I'm going to just sort of transition into the next slide in a second, that organizations start to think about automating their processes across the broader business function and not simply just getting their hands around their spend, right? Which is absolutely, I think, the foundation to operational excellence or best-in-class procurement performance. It's having visibility into spend. Zach, I don't know if you want to comment or have a thought?
Yeah, these results are actually a little bit different than I expected, with contract management outstripping e-sourcing in particular. We're seeing so many evaluations for contract management solutions, often in a standalone environment. So clearly this group that we've got on the phone here is somewhat ahead of the curve in the adoption of some of these technologies.
Yep, and that's great, right? But again, you know, it's not just the adoption of technology, right? It's the technology in and of itself doesn't just open the door to value creation, right? You need professionals who know how to utilize it and draw value from business technology. And you know, I'm going to just continue on now and talk a little bit about each of these 4 pillars of strategic sourcing. And so, you know, I guess from a visual standpoint, this is how we would see those technologies interrelate. Procurement departments that succeed in the consistent execution of their sourcing projects are the ones that take a holistic approach to the entire sourcing process and then also leverage automation tools across it. leading departments define their sourcing process as one that begins with opportunity identification, right? So you utilize spend analysis there, and it carries through contract execution, right? It doesn't end at the awarding of a contract, right? You actually have to carry it that last mile and get the contract executed. And then there's an ongoing evaluation of those suppliers that you have awarded the contracts to, that you have implemented, to make sure that the savings that you've identified and have, sort of embedded into the terms and conditions of your contract, that the service levels that have been agreed upon are actually being delivered, right? And so, the sourcing process attributes of leading teams really, yes, there's process automation. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but it really does, by and large, they're taking a holistic approach to sourcing, right? And it starts in the data itself, the spend data itself, and it again, just carries all the way through contract execution. And beyond taking that larger view, that longer view of the process, and really looking at it as a single process, what leaders also look at is standardizing, right? So consistent execution of a sourcing process that's clearly defined benefits all stakeholders in the enterprise. Standardized policies and processes provide sourcing leaders with parameters within which they can execute their craft, and it helps set expectations for budget holders as to project timelines, required resources, and project evaluation criteria and methodology. Now, although their sourcing processes are standardized, right, I talked about this before, right, the sort of the marriage of strategic sourcing and sourcing, leading procurement departments understand that some deviation of process is acceptable based upon the project's category and the stakeholders and the potential value opportunity, among others. So now, we did our own research, right, and we saw the results of the audience today. I'm going to drill down into each of the specific pillars of strategic sourcing and look at the usage and how it's being utilized today, right? So we start off with spend analysis, right? And so we're talking about automated or fully automated spend analysis today, and that may explain part of the difference between the pretty high number and what we see here today. So the data we've collected here and what we present here is fully automated spend analysis, and the market adoption today is about 40%. It's about the trend, and it's a little bit lower than some of our other surveys in years past, but it's been in that general area between 40 and 50%. Now, fully automated spend analysis tools help procurement professionals view enterprise spend and thereby better understand and take action upon it. Reports from an automated spend analysis tool should be more accurate and timely than those created in a manual process, since the automated spend analysis process is more scalable and easily repeatable, right? And so, what does spend analysis do? It helps collect and aggregate and cleanse and then present all the spend that is with your suppliers, and it allows for sourcing teams to find and identify sourcing opportunities that they may not otherwise have found. Again, when we think of a strategic organization, organizations that don't have a visibility into their spend, I find it very hard for that procurement organization to make the case that they're a strategic business function, right? Visibility into spend remains the foundation for best-in-class performance in procurement. Now, connecting the dots, right, it's not just the visibility into spend. You need an organization that has to be able to take action on it and turn that data into value, turn that information into value. So here we look at eSourcing numbers, which are very similar to what was presented or what was captured in today's survey with our data. Now, again, and this may, I think, is well known for folks. eSourcing is one of the most mature solutions in the marketplace. Having really been around since the late '90s and the advent of the B2B internet bubble. But eSourcing applications, automate the supplier negotiation process, and they remain among the most powerful supply management solutions available today. Price discovery, process efficiencies, bid evaluation analysis and optimization, and improved stakeholder visibility are among the benefits that eSourcing users typically report, right? And so eSourcing automates your RFP process, right, your RFQ process, your supplier negotiation process. The tools are really quite multifaceted, right? So when we start to drill down, and so we see that, again, around 50% of the marketplace has an eSourcing tool in place today. We're going to see, the levels of sourcing throughput that these organizations are also, the amount of spend or the amount of sourcing projects that are actually being used on these tools. What we would like to see in the market is greater sophistication in the use of the advanced features and functionalities. We still see far too many single bid, somewhat stripped down and simplified sourcing projects, and the technology is not going away. And so for those younger professionals on the call today who really are looking to advance up their organizations, right, one of our primary recommendations would be to really look at the eSourcing tool that your organization has or that are available in the market, and gain an expertise in really being able to drive value across being able to utilize the tools and thereby drive value, right? So succeeding in sourcing is a path up the departmental ladder. And so, but again, it's not just taking the data and identifying and building a sourcing pipeline and creating projects from those opportunities that were identified, and then running the event in the sourcing tool, right? The contract is also an important part, right? And I would share, Zach's comment that, it's surprising to me that contract management automation tools were as highly adopted by the folks on this call as we've seen, because this has been an area that has been slower to develop from a market standpoint. And the reasons are many, but there's a lot of value for organizations that can then link the results of a sourcing project immediately into a contract, connecting those dots. Automated contract management systems serve as repositories for executed contracts and can also be used to manage the contract creation process. Benefits of automated contract management systems include an ability to standardize contract language, track and measure compliance to contractual payment terms and service levels, streamline processes, and better assess supplier performance risk across the portfolio of contracts, right? And so, the first three really are, when you think of it, the core of strategic sourcing, and then brings us to another, which, again, unfortunately does lag in the marketplace, right? And again, the question that we're asking here is, fully automated supplier performance management solutions, which help enterprises rate and grade a supplier's performance across all aspects of its product, services, and contractual obligations. Users of this solution, we call it SPM, can utilize the tool to develop supplier surveys and scorecards, track performance, and collaborate with internal stakeholders and suppliers to improve performance. And so, now we've sort of set a groundwork. Let's look at best-in-class sourcing today, right? And so, sourcing more and faster has long been procurement's path to greater influence and savings. And the impact from high-volume sourcing can be a game changer for the Chief Procurement Officer and the entire organization. But once a sourcing organization has matured to a point where it can source 70 to 80% of its addressable spend annually, it must shift its focus from increasing sourcing volume to increasing sourcing quality, right? So a move from speed to agility. Now, most organizations aren't sourcing 70 to 80% of their addressable spend, but as we're about to see on this next page, the best-in-class actually are. They're sourcing a, phenomenal amount of their addressable spend, and it's quite impressive that they're also, saving as much as they do. And so let's look at some of the performance benchmarks, right? So the best-in-class, right? So, in our analysis of the 249 participants in this research effort, we've defined the best-in-class as the top 20% of all sourcing organizations based upon savings and based upon sourcing throughput. So, by definition, they're sourcing more and they're saving more. But, it's interesting to note that they also have much greater influence in their organizations when you look at the amount of spend that the best-in-class have placed under management. They've also got somewhat higher compliance, somewhat superior compliance rates, but nonetheless, to be able to source almost 90% of the addressable spend is really quite impressive, right? And so, this is not all of the spend, right? So addressable spend, and if there's questions about that, we'll come back to it. But it's basically what are the total opportunities to renew contracts or to have new contracts in a given year. The best in class, right? It's really it's really a mind-blowing number, and it's really quite impressive, and it should lead the majority of the marketplace to the conclusion that it is possible to source more, and it's possible to source more with the same organization that you have today if you're properly connecting the dots. Do you have the right people? Do you have the right processes? Do you have the right technologies? So a couple quick differentiators, right, on how the best-in-class are able to really significantly outperform the rest of the market, right? I didn't spend too much time talking about savings, but, the savings numbers were significantly higher, and that savings number is applied to a much larger amount of spend that's also being managed and influenced. But where do the best-in-class thrive? Right, so they do take that holistic view. They map that holistic view of strategic sourcing to process automation tools, as we'll see in a second. They standardize their processes, right? I mean, to manage almost 80% of the total spend within an organization, you've got to be doing some things right, and it starts with process, it starts with technology, and then, really where they also thrive, right, is in collaboration and their ability to engage the larger organization. And so the superior collaboration was a self-rated grade. Those best in class mark themselves significantly higher, and it becomes very clear, right, again, if you're able to source such a high percentage of addressable spend, if you're managing such a nice number total enterprise spend, you've got to have the engagement of the organization. You probably also need a mandate as well. But again, operating in the age of collaboration, the best in class really are doing phenomenally well. Technology plays a key part in that. As you can see in the blue numbers, significant gaps between the best in class and their use of technology and their combination of technology as opposed to all others. And so, what does that bring us to, right? In recent years, sourcing leaders have been firsthand witnesses to the dramatic impact that globalization and open trade have had on their organizations. These forces have combined to simultaneously expand their supply chains and tighten the economic linkage to their trading partners. Companies in all regions and of all sizes are increasingly global, and the need to support business relationships with global trading partners has become a priority of the first order. And while globalization, innovation, and the resulting increase in competition have helped to streamline and improve business performance, they've also served to increase business volatility and supply management complexity, right? I mean, working today in sourcing is much more complex than it was 15 years ago, or really before the move to low-cost country sourcing. Many more markets, many more potential suppliers, right? Today, still, strategic sourcing remains procurement's primary method to combat these concerns and navigate the fast-changing landscape. The teams that adeptly use their sourcing tools and expertise to support the evolving needs of the business are the ones that will stand head and shoulders above all others. So we've got a few strategies and recommendations on approach for procurement executives looking to build and maintain a leading sourcing program. So I'm going to walk you through a few of those right here, right? So eSourcing is strategic sourcing, right? I made mention of this earlier. As we start to change the definition of strategic sourcing or sourcing in general, right? An organization in 2014 can't call a process that eschews technology, completely avoids it as strategic, right? Now's the time to begin to automate if you haven't already. If you have automated, now's the time to put your foot on the accelerator and begin to get more advanced in how you utilize the tools to your best advantage. Talked a lot about spend analysis, and almost any presentation that has a sourcing or procurement or supply management focus, it ends up coming back to spend analysis, right? It really is the basis for making informed business decisions. The success starts there. Again, it's connecting the dots, though, that really drives the value. And that's ensuring, that you've linked your processes, that you've linked your systems, right? If you, are fully manual in an environment today, and you start, you should be starting to make the case to make that change. And if you don't have a budget for a full strategic sourcing suite, you need to be starting to think about over the long term, how you ultimately get there, how you transform your processes, and how you get started requires that you have a vision or an end goal in mind. And that goal, you know, if it's 2 to 3 or 4 years down the road, so be it. You know, technology, you know, in place is not going to just win the day for you, right? You have to have the right people. You know, it's a better market now for finding a job if you're in the profession, but it's still, you know, for leaders of sourcing and procurement organizations, you know, it's not just an open. They're not given a blank check, right? So you've got to be very deliberate in understanding what your organization is focused on today. And then, you know, it's almost time to take a pause and think about where your organization is going to be in 5 years from now. And think about how businesses change and what it's going to look like in 5 years from now, and begin to put the pieces in place from a staffing and a talent perspective so that in 5 years you are set to go. You know, big shift in the way that organizations think of suppliers, and it really should be just a broad-based shift in the way they think of all suppliers. Certainly there are tactical relationships that you have with suppliers where you just need something at a price and you need it there. But, you know, when you start to think of the key suppliers and your strategic suppliers as assets, when you have an asset, right, like your house, right, you don't just, you know, manage it to the core, right? You paint it every couple of years. You know, you put new windows on. You landscape it because it's an asset that has value and can gain value. Supplier relationships with organization, you know, a supplier relationship is an asset, so invest in it. And then finally, you know, expand the definition of strategic sourcing and apply those best practices and principles to all sourcing efforts and put them under one umbrella. And so it's with that now, I'm going to pass it over to Zach, and he's going to walk you through a few great case studies. So Zach?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. And for everyone who's on the phone, this is an unbelievably exciting study that Andrew has conducted here. He's gone through just tons and tons of research and really put in a tremendous level of effort here. So we certainly applaud him, but I'm looking forward to the full report coming out so that we can all review that and get a better idea of connecting the dots with strategic sourcing. So again, I'm Zach Bolt. I'm the Director of Solutions Consulting at Zycus, and so my team is responsible for getting out in the field with the sales staff and understanding the needs of some of the world's largest organizations and how we can map technology solutions to those organizations to fulfill their procurement goals and objectives. So I hate to assume for the moment that everyone who's on this phone, there's hundreds of you, actually know who Zycus is and know about the products that we offer. So I want to take just a couple of minutes and talk about the solutions that Zycus has brought to the market over the last 15 years of our existence. And then I want to walk you through some case studies that I have that will underscore the value of how, from a technology perspective, and not just having solutions and having them somewhat implemented and them having them sit as shelfware, but actually having them being utilized is driving real savings to Zycus customers. So Zycus started in business about 15 years ago, around the year 2000, with our spend analytics solution. We have an artificial intelligence-based spend analysis engine that will classify your spend and give you a significant insight into where your company's dollars are going. So I'm going to be starting on this wheel here, and I'm starting at 1 o'clock, and I'm going to go around clockwise here. So we've got our products actually divided into two major pieces here. We have the strategic products, or you may hear them called the upstream products, all in the orangish yellow, and then what we call the operational or the transactional side of the house is going to be on the blue over on the right-hand, or rather on the left-hand side of the screen. So starting back again here with spend analytics, Zycus has been doing this for nearly 15 years. And over the course of time, we recognized, to Andrew's point and to what his research has shown, that while spend analytics is, in fact, core to the entire source-to-pay application domain space and to the core competencies of what procurement organizations are looking to accomplish, it also needs supplementation. So what do you do with the outputs of spend analytics? And so that's why Zycus developed in-house a strategic sourcing application. This is where you run all of your RFIs and your RFPs and your RFQs and your auctions. So out of the output now of spend analytics is that we have a sourcing platform that you can now make actionable. The savings that you identify in spend, you can then drive it directly into sourcing and then actually capture that savings through negotiations with your suppliers. Well, then the next logical step is contract management. So now that we have identified savings, we have sourced savings, now we have to go out and negotiate the savings and then put the T's and C's around it and actually have contracts that we can then execute against. So that's why Zycus built a contract management application. And then we recognize the need for supplier management. And there's really two parts here. There's the supplier master data and information management that enables you to capture all of the records and create a collaborative platform with a supplier portal that enables your suppliers to feed you the documentation and keep all of their records up to date and for you to drive them through governance and due diligence workflows, whether it's on routine updates or through the onboarding process. But then there is that larger piece that really is more strategic in nature, and that is the supplier performance management. What are the KPIs that we need to rate our suppliers on? We need to identify our most strategic players in our supply chain, and we need to attempt to derive more value out of those guys. So how do we do that? And that's with a performance management solution that enables you to create KPIs, to create scorecards, and then rate your suppliers, not only at point in time, but also do trending analysis so that you can identify high-performing suppliers, reward them, and then also identify laggards that you would wish to be more strategic elements of your supply chain, and ultimately put them on development plans and help you to gain more value out of those relationships. So that briefly rounds out the strategic side of the house. Just briefly, on the operational side, starting from about the 7 o'clock, the requisition all the way up through the invoice management represents the procure-to-pay cycle. So Zycus a couple of years ago brought to market a full Web 2.0 browser-based in the cloud procure-to-pay solution that does everything from supplier network and requisitioning, managing your POs all the way through invoices, supplier portal, and the whole 9 yards. So we've done that because that really takes and brings the procurement, the functions, all the money that you've negotiated and contracted and saved, it brings it out to the masses and makes it operational throughout the entire organization for everyone who has the ability to spend your company's money. So that is a brief, very brief introduction to the Zycus application suite. I'm going to now take you through a couple of case studies here to talk a little bit about what Zycus customers are gaining, some of the value that they're getting out of our solutions. So the first one is going to be a global pharmaceutical manufacturing company. They're into biotechnology, really high-tech stuff from a healthcare perspective. And as you look at this slide here on the screen, you'll see over on the top left-hand side the solution footprint that they have with Zycus. So they've got a pretty heavy investment in Zycus technologies from just a number of products in their overall getting their hands into procurement along with Zycus. So they've got spend analytics, they've got our sourcing application, they've got our contract management application, and they also have supplier management, and they're looking at purchasing even more products from us. So in this case study, I wanted to take a single category and tell you what this particular company was able to do in the area of IT staff augmentation or contingent labor in their IT department. So using our spend analytics solution, they gained a baseline. So they identified this category as one that had probably too many suppliers, and we've got an automated process that we do that. It's called spend mining, where we actually will mine out potential opportunities for savings, present them to you, and say, all right, now what do you want to do with those? So this was one of those that was pulled out by our automated mining process and presented to them and said, look, you guys are spending $35 million in IT staff outsourcing every year. You've got 40 suppliers, but you got no control over this, and there's no consistency in the payment terms. There's no consistency in discounting, volume-based rebates, nothing. So they identified this, and then using the Zycus sourcing application, they actually went out and conducted a multi-stage. They did a request for information, then they did an RFP, and then they did an auction. So ultimately, they were able to drive down the number of suppliers from 40 to 8, an 80% reduction in their overall supply base for this particular category, and then saved $12.3 million off the baseline. So now they're getting the same level of service, but instead of spending $35 million a year, now they're spending only $22.7. That's a 35% cost savings And in addition, on top of that, this is kind of the cherry on top, they're also going to be getting more than $500,000 a year in rebates because they've now consolidated to a fewer number of more strategic suppliers. So tremendous, tremendous ability to save leveraging solutions like Zycus. All right, so this one is going to be a named case study. Everyone is familiar with AMD or advanced micro devices. I actually had the chance to meet the CPO for AMD last year at our Horizon event, which occurs every November. And I got to chat with him a little bit about their challenges and what they were able to accomplish with Zycus solution. So they're using our spend analytics solution. They also have our sourcing, and then they've got our supplier performance management as well, which, as we saw in the poll earlier, that is one of the products or the functional areas that has the lowest level of adoption when we talk about the technologies that procurement organizations have taken up as strategic portions of their organization. So the business challenges here are really, I'll cut this kind of short, really threefold. They needed cost reduction because of margin pressure, number one. They had, because they make microchips, they get a lot of their raw materials and supplies from potentially pretty risky supply chain areas, so they had to shore up and identify and mitigate risk in their supply base. And then, in addition, they also had pressure from overhead, not only to increase productivity within the procurement organization, they also had to, at this simultaneously, reduce headcount. They were able to, leveraging our solutions, were able to accomplish all three of these goals. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see some of the things they were able to do to save money. They were able to globally standardize on net 60 payment terms. They were able to get significantly higher adoption on their, internally on their sourcing platform over the baseline of their legacy solution. And then they were able to standardize the supplier performance measurement across the entire globe and really segment their supply base and see who their most strategic suppliers were and which ones they could potentially dump off board. So the numbers speak for themselves here. They were able to reduce the headcount for their procurement organization almost by a fourth, but then they also increased per full-time equivalent that they kept on board. They were able to increase the savings per person working by more than 25%, and they reduced their global supply base by almost a third. So this is just unbelievable numbers from an organization the size of AMD. So my final case study here is going to be for those of you who are in the manufacturing industry. So this one speaks to a couple of things. Number one, it's going to speak to Zycus flexibility and our ability to move and to be agile in our development processes and the way we partner with our customers. It also speaks to the amount of savings that you're able to gain when you've got a technology partner who can be nimble and be agile right along beside you. So the challenge that Rockwell brought to us was they had a legacy platform for sourcing. They were unable to run events the size of a size and scope that was acceptable to them. And so basically, they needed to run events up to 7,000 to 10,000 line items with up to 150 to 200 suppliers. And their existing solution was categorically unable to do this. And so they had to break single events up into multiple events because of the limitation of their technology, and ultimately this cost them a lot of time, and they were unable to be very efficient in the processes, as we'll see just in a moment. So they brought this challenge to Zycus, and we said, you know what, that's really not where we want you to be. We want to partner with you. We don't want technology to be a process blocker or an inhibitor. So with Zycus, what we did, we worked together with them to understand their requirements. We actually made an enhancement to our application that would enable them to exceed 10,000 line items per sourcing event. So just think about that for a minute. RFP, RFQ with over 10,000 individual line items and supplier up to 200 suppliers, including complex cost models and calculations that were done as part of the sourcing event, advanced bid optimization. Ultimately, what Rockwell was able to do was to cut the cycle time of their sourcing process by 65%. So that's a 2/3 reduction. The real number here is that it was taking them about 3 months to run a single event in their old technology. Adopting a new cloud technology with Zycus, they were able to cut that same process down to about a month. Now you think about the amount of savings that you're able to negotiate in a single sourcing event. Now imagine being able to do 3 times more of the same type of sourcing events per year without adding any additional staff. that is huge, huge as far as your ability to impact the overall bottom line. So not only do they leverage our sourcing application, they also use our contract management application, and they've been able to gain Sarbanes-Oxley compliance for their approval workflows. They've been able to make sure they're following their own internal governance processes, and then they've been able to standardize the way their contract look and feel across their entire organization, and some of the numbers here speak for themselves. So just tremendous, tremendous savings, as well as the ability to speed up the velocity at which the procurement organization is running and enabling procurement to run at the same speed that the business wants to, leveraging Zycus Technology Solutions. So that brings me right up to 10 minutes before the hour. I want to turn this back over to John because we wanted to leave about 10 minutes for questions for Andrew and for myself. So John, thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach. It's now time to address some questions that came in during the presentation. Our first question, this is a question to you, Zach. Describe some of the automated strategies for savings and sourcing mentioned in the spend analysis solution.
Yeah, so Zycus actually, we built an automated mining solution that works in tandem with spend analytics, just kind of the raw data. So if you think about it, some of the low-hanging fruit is going to be supplier rationalization. So rationalization of that long tail of spend and collapsing the supply base into a fewer number of more strategic suppliers. Contract compliance is another huge one. Examining spend to determine, are you actually spending on contract or are you not? Payment term rationalization is another area where our customers see huge, huge savings in looking at across business units, regions, geographies, even for the same supplier, we're paying different payment terms. In one business unit, we've got net 30, another we got net 60. So with your cost of capital, if you're able to standardize on single payment terms by region, by geography, by supplier, or even globally per organization, then you're able to save your organization a lot of money. So we've got about a dozen strategies that we've just identified right out of the box that give you tremendous opportunities for savings. And in addition, looking at spend on that could be pushed to P cards and enable you to gain a lot of savings on rebates is another strategy that a lot of our customers really, really like.
Okay, great. Thank you, Zach. Andrew, what are the strategies to drive better usage of technology?
Right. So just simply deploying a technology does not guarantee that you're going to get the end users to adopt it, right? And when we look at strategic sourcing tools, often one of the main constituents or stakeholders that are slower to adopt really are the ones that exist within their business today. So exist within procurement today. So I think we've seen, I've been tracking this and working on this for a long time now. Setting a mandate, I think is first and foremost still the most tried and true strategy for success in driving end user adoption of solutions that have been deployed. Beyond that, I think, when you look at who the users are and the control that you have over them, right, for sourcing professionals, right, who have great negotiation skills, who have been working in an offline world, they view the technology as a threat, right? And so we've got to get people over the hump, with a little bit of a carrot and a little bit of a stick, right? And so the carrot would be, or I guess it all depends on how you would consider it, but, linking bonuses and performance goals to the usage of technology is another, I think, very solid way to do that. And then I think you have got to coach people to let them understand that, there's a learning process. The first time you utilize a solution, it may not be as fast and efficient as, you started to do it many times down the road. But so I think that those are just a few strategies. More broad-based, I think it's also developing expertise within the organization, right? The team of specialists that others in the organization can go to and leverage that success more broadly. Leverage that expertise more broadly across the organization.
All right, great points. Zach, what categories do companies normally see the most savings on using auctions and other multi-round sourcing events?
Yeah, so I've actually seen a couple of questions here that pertain to exactly what a reverse auction is. So I think I'll first answer that, and then I'll answer that question as well. So a reverse auction is one where generally speaking, is one where you've negotiated a price through like an RFP and RFQ, and then you want to just beat that price down as much as possible. So you start with a price ceiling, whatever is negotiated down to in the RFQ stage, add a second round to the overall sourcing event chain, and then the reverse auction is where people bid lower and lower instead of higher and higher, and ultimately you're able to drive those prices down. So segueing into answering the question that you just asked, John, is really around a lot of times for manufacturers who do a lot of manufacturing of like widgets where there's very little differentiation between the products. So like AMD, for example, or other micro devices, those type of consumer packaged goods potentially, where they're doing very, very similar things. The sourcing of your direct materials through auctions or those reverse auctions is an area where you can leverage a lot of savings. And then on categories like indirect categories like MRO, office supplies, and things like that, people will just choose 2 or 3 vendors and then just let them go to war with each other and beat down the prices as much as possible because, a box of pens or, pairs of gloves for MROs, stuff like that, they're pretty much standard type of products, and you can just let everybody beat their prices down and ultimately drive a ton of savings doing that.
Yeah.
Right,
hey, and this, John, this is Andrew, right? So I just want to hop in, right, because there's still, 15 years in, continues to be a little bit of a misunderstanding as to what a reverse auction is as opposed to e-sourcing. And really, for folks listening to it, I'd like them to just start to consider and think about reverse auctions as one type of negotiation, right? So when you utilize an e-sourcing tool, yes, you can get your suppliers into sort of a commoditized bidding event that's sort of driven by lowest price, and lowest price wins. But the sourcing tools offer, much broader functionality, right? And you can factor in other aspects like quality. And there's a whole host of, I think I delivered a webinar with Zycus last year on the, looking at non-price attributes. So the tool itself, right, so e-sourcing is not reverse auctions, in and out, and that's all there is, right? It's a very broad-based tool. When you look at all of the different types of negotiations, including a one-to-one negotiation, these tools capture the communications that go back and forth, provide a fantastic audit trail, provide great visibility for a broad-based team, a globally based team to come in and do their own evaluation and offer their own scores on an aggregated single point view of all of the bids submitted by suppliers. So.
Great point, Andrew. And another question, Andrew, is why are the technology adoption rates for these solutions so low?
Right, it's one that we struggle. It's one I struggle with every day, right? I think. We've got to take the longer-term view of enterprise-level technology. I think that, when email was first invented, right, according to, many, it was the late 1950s, early 1960s timeframe. Organizations didn't start utilizing email as the primary means. You probably didn't get a corporate email address until the mid-90s at the earliest, right, if you're in higher ed or maybe government, public sector, or defense, maybe a little bit earlier. So it takes a while, right, and you need to go through a revolution or two. What I would say is that it is inevitable that we will all, procurement professionals will all be working, a decade from now in an almost fully automated environment, right? And so, the numbers are, fair to middling, right? Mediocre to a degree, because making these broad shifts takes some time, right? I mean, it's almost a generational shift. When you look at how people think about technology, they often say, right, if a technology existed before a person was 30 years old, you don't really consider it technology, right? So my children grow up with the internet on computers. I didn't, right? The internet's technology to me. To them, it's just part of how they communicate and talk and watch things. We're getting to a point now where more and more professionals are coming on board, and they're seeing enterprise technology is really just how things are done. There wasn't an old way, a different way. And so, you know, this shift takes time. Part of it's a generational thing. Part of it is just sort of the challenges that organizations have in adopting new things. I'll say that the technologies today, they're more affordable, they're more accessible, right? You've got a lot of cloud-based things, they're more usable in general. You know, this is happening, you know, again, to those listening on the phone, a great way to accelerate your career is to become adept at utilizing these tools, because inevitably organizations are going to be using these.
Excellent points. Thank you again to Andrew Bartolini and Zachary Bolt for an informative program. Attendees of today's event will receive an email from ISM within 10 business days with links to your continuing education hour certificate and the archived interactive recording of today's event. For these secure links to work, you must be logged into ISM's website at www.ism.ws. Log in near the top of the screen in the shaded gray boxes. As you exit today's webcast, please take a couple minutes to complete our survey. We strongly welcome your detailed comments to help us serve you better. We appreciate your time and hope you have found this webcast to be a valuable experience. Enjoy the rest of your day.